Yes, and clients push back, it's not, they push back. I've had many people tell me you're wrong or typically come back the next session and be very, very upset with me. And I always welcome that. Well, tell me. And I'll have people say, well, you said this and it wasn't, and I'll listen and go, God, I'm really, you know, I can't, I'll say something like, I can't say I'm sorry for evoking this emotion in you. And I hear you, and what you said matters. And I still believe what I said. And people will leave, but yeah, we come to counseling to peel back those layers of the artichoke
Yeah.
so we can get to that heart. And that heart is just so soft and beautiful,
Mm.
so delicious.
So, in your sessions, how often do you find that depression is less about sadness and more about rage that has been pushed down for years?
That is a good question. Hmm.
Because we were just talking about rage,
We were, we were, we were. What I see often, so everyone has met the person that I think that we describe this person and we make caricatures out of them for movies. It is oftentimes let's say if you're a fan of The Handmaid's Tale, the Aunt Lydia, the what do you call them when you stayed home and you don't have children, the spinster, the the person that you see every day at work, or the aunt or the cousin that has a resting bitch face, that woman that looks, are you I can't believe that. I would not know because but the resting bitch face, the anger, the rage, everything, they're
Mhm.
critical about everything. They're pessimistic
Mhm.
about everything. The glass is and that person is miserable. It seems like they're always chewing on a bowl of rocks. Well, that's rage. These people are often very successful, really hardworking, stayed in the same apartment their whole lives, stayed, accomplished everything, but they are angry that they had to do it without anyone ever seeing them. And so what they do is make themselves unseeable, untouchable. No one wants to reach out there because they're afraid they're going to draw back a nub. And that's rage. That's depression. That's depression, sadness disguised as rage.
Okay.
So I typically see that in people who are very critical, difficult to get along with, who you want to love even, but they're just really angry. And I see that always as sadness.
Mm. Okay.
Hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
how do you support these women in exploring and releasing that rage safely?
Yeah, yeah. So I say that I think it's important, right, to say to a client exactly what you think. It's important as a therapist to stand on their clinical knowledge, in other words. And I will say to my patients in a minute, if I'm afraid to say to you what I believe is a challenge for you, then I'm not worth the ink that I sign my name with. That you've come here to get something accomplished. I can't be afraid. I'm the one person that can't be afraid to challenge you. So I will say that this you present. I might say it this way. I might say, what would you think if I said, no, patience. Oh, you just said it. What would you think if I said that you have an angry demeanor? Right? That's very straightforward. Very challenging. So I say, I'm not meaning to ruffle your feathers. Actually, maybe I am. I'd like you to consider that this anger is a cover for sadness. Because the other thing I see within you is something very soft, something that worked really hard all these years to not disappoint anyone. And so I think again that I love the skill of being a therapist, because knowing how to what theories, what modalities to pull up.
And that makes a lot of sense what you said, that as someone's therapist, if you as their therapist have to be worried or afraid by what you're saying to your client, to your patient, then yeah, it's not going to work, because that patient or that patient is not going to get what they need if you can't be honest and true about what you're saying, because that's why you came to a therapist. That's why the patient came to a therapist, so you can get that honest, true feedback, so you can work through whatever you need to work through. So that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about that.
Yes, and clients push back, it's not, they push back. I've had many people tell me you're wrong, or typically come back the next session and be very, very upset with me. And I always welcome that. Well, tell me, tell me, tell me. And I'll have people say, well, you said this and it wasn't, and I'll listen and go, God, I'm really, you know, I can't, I'll say something like, I can't say I'm sorry for evoking this emotion in you. And I hear you, and what you said matters. And I still believe what I said. And people will leave, but yeah, we come to counseling to peel back those layers of the artichoke,
Yeah.
so we can get to that heart. And that heart is just so soft and beautiful, so delicious. Yes.
So, what impact does spiritual disconnection, feeling cut off from ancestors, maybe intuition or purpose, have on depression, especially in Black women in midlife?
I think it has a profound impact. I Now look, one of the things I accept, I believe that not believing, okay, whether it's God or some higher power, but not being a non-believer is a person's religious right. And a non-believer, I couldn't imagine personally, and certainly in my practice, it's been very hard to see people heal only through practical means, right?
Mhm.
Heal only through, and I'm going to put clinical means in the practical means.
Mhm.
Exercise, therapy, yoga, right? Practical means.
Right.
When folks that I've worked with, clients over time, and those that I continue to work with, that not all, right? Because a spiritual connection is also not is not a ticket to divine success. But those folks that are able to connect to something spiritual, a power greater than self, a higher ground, a church, a community, I see this process being less difficult, less isolating. But it's hard, I think, to get through the times that we're in now,
Mhm.
and to get through the very, very personal journey of getting old in America as a woman. It almost chokes me up a little bit as I talk about it. I mean, this is turning out to be one of the most pensive years of my life at 60 years old. And I think the scariest thing about it is that now every time I'm silly, which is every 5 minutes, someone goes, but you're 60. You know? But that spiritual connection, if we're cut off from our spirit, is ancestral. You understand what I'm saying? It's like this for my other side, my Jewish side. Spirit is ancestral. The practices, this is ancestral. So if we cut ourselves off from ancestral practices, from which include rest, uh, inner knowing, right? So inner discovery,
Mhm.
depression can often spike when we lose that thread of meaning. And so while it's not my thing to build an altar and call in the stars, if that works for you, keep it going,
Right. Right.
right? Keep it going. My thing is church. I like, I'm a Christian lady and I go to the coolest church on earth, baseball caps and hip hop. That's how we start. Um, but that spiritual connection keeping us deeper, and this spiritual connection in therapy helps us go to different places in our psyche, in our being, in our history.
Mhm.
And really spiritual practice can help us reconnect with these super egos that didn't get their needs met early on in our development, so that we can integrate, shed the pain, address it, shed it, and then integrate them. And the older we get, we hope, right, we're becoming more of a whole person.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, do you think the constant pressure to stay positive or be grateful can actually deepen depression when it becomes performative?
Absolutely. I mean, it certainly is. I just have to say, behind me is Rocco. He's sleeping and he's so cute. And I just want to say that he brings me so much joy. I can just see his little face. Absolutely. I think all of us have watched what, you know, all of us have seen, let's say, the benefit in staying positive, being upbeat, being cheerleaders. But the pressure to be like that when it's not real, when it's not where you are. And let's not forget, right, that depression
Mhm.
becomes clinical, right? So so there's situational depression and clinical depression, and there is a difference between the two.
Okay.
And anyone, if you suffer from clinical depression, which we assess using the ACEs, and also it's not just that, we assess it by certainly looking at the history, but we look at how many episodes, depressive episodes you have during what length of time, right? We use tools here, the DSM-5. We're not just going off the top of our heads, diagnosing. I hope we're not. And so but you can have a situational, so a death, a loss, um, a big event in the community, right, that can cause depression. Listen, a lot of women are still, Black women in particular, but many women are trying to crawl their way out of a collective depression that we feel following the outcome of this election, this presidential election.
Right.
And this was not just feelings, right? Women felt taken down by sadness, fear, hopelessness. That's depression. So that should move on as situational depression in most people.
How do you help them? How do you help the women give themselves permission not to be okay?
We have to give ourselves permission not to be okay, right? And this is really it. Oftentimes, we are walking around as women looking for and feeling like, and maybe we've been programmed to think that someone else has to validate our need. They know better what I need. And this is why we go to work when our mothers die instead of making the funeral. We go to work when we have flus and temperatures, right? We go to work when your brother is only coming through town for one day and you haven't seen him in 7 years, because we're thinking more about someone else's need or the organization's need versus our own.
Yeah.
And we only feel that we can acknowledge our own need when someone else says it's okay. We are the only ones that can stop this and say, actually, what I need today is a day off. What I need right today
Mhm.
is to have a talk. It takes a lot of courage, right, to pick up the phone and say, hey, can I talk? I am really struggling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Our friends are and our family members are not mind readers. It'd be nice, but they're not. So it's a two-way thing, a willingness to be available, right, from a true heart, open heart space, and a willingness to seek out help.
And be vulnerable because
Be vulnerable. I
that's the
mean, at
hard
the end
part.
of the day, that's all we have, right? If to stop the pressure of performing, we must stop performing.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Stand by what you stand by. We have to decide that our needs matter. And it's okay to not have an explanation or a narrative, just to say something's going on, and can't really, don't really have anything to say, but I'd like to, can I sleep on your couch for the next 3 days? Don't want to be alone, right? And the thing for you to say or me to say is absolutely pull ourselves out of it. Small thing like that can make a difference. Yeah, we have to stop performing.
So, what does emotional freedom look like for women over 50 who have spent their lives just in survival mode?
Oh, I love this. I mean, Angela, I have something so special to share with you about what emotional freedom in midlife can feel like in midlife and in later life. I'm not going to call it old life yet, but later
No.
life. Yes, later life. I wish these spots would stop showing up all over my body. I'm like, what is that? I didn't have a freckle there. Um, this week, I have a special friend
Mm.
that I spoke with for the first time a year and a half ago. And she's a 68-year-old woman. She's 68-year-old Black woman. And we met on these YouTube, right? Watching shows about African Americans retiring abroad. And we exchanged numbers, and she lives out in Colorado, and she never traveled outside of the country. And I told her my dream for moving to Portugal and why. And over the next 6 months, I pounded her about why she should leave the country. And but we became friends, and we there was a lot of fear stuff. So let me just jump forward. Tomorrow, 1 year and a half later, and I'm still here. She's gone. She leaves tomorrow for Portugal. Her life, she has her apartment. This is, we're talking about, right? Emotional freedom in midlife. This lady went from telling me how she could never leave her family. She's a widower. She could never, or a widow, right? Never leave her family, could never do that. This gone tomorrow, has her visa gone, has her address gone tomorrow. For me, that is when, because the thing that, this is the example, the thing that and she was still working full time and crazy hours. We could never connect by phone because she's working, she's older than me, and she's working like 20 hours more than me a week.
Okay.
And at some point, she said, I no longer perform to be loved.
Mm.
I no longer silence myself to keep the peace.
Mm.
I choose softness without apology.
Right.
Emotional freedom means releasing the burdens that were never ours to begin with. What you think your children need from you, what you think, right, someone else, what you think is appropriate for a woman your age and from your community and your culture, what you think. This was never your burden to carry anyway, right?
Right. Right.
And so that freedom for someone who was so invested in a way that was the way from the time that she ever remembered, boom, gone. And to think that I had something to do with that,
That just means it's your turn next. It sure.
Hey, yes, wherever the good Lord, I know definitely, that this is my dream for so many reasons. Um, and I also know that I go where the good Lord sends me. And I know that He has asked me to shepherd without gain
Mm.
and to help my sisters. And I do that with pure love.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm going to be a little bit more selective coming up.
Hey, gotta be.
But this lady, so I bring that up to say,
Oh,
it's such a great question around what emotional freedom. I have a new patient as of yesterday, a
uh,
45-year-old Black woman. She's lived all of her life in emotional poverty and the worst of the aces. And she came yesterday and she said, Miss Jackson, I am ready. And I was just like, get it, girl, let's do this.
yeah.
And I asked her, I said, how much time you want to spend here in the past? Because I think the balance is off. Let's just catapult you into your first dream.
Mm.
And I love, that. So you asked me earlier, what is the benefit? This is the benefit. We help one lady, she helps three. But it's got to be for the purpose of love and the purpose of spiritual growth and the purpose of connection. It cannot be exclusive from those things.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, how does depression show up in ambition? So, have you seen women push harder, overwork themselves,
Oh,
constantly start a new project to avoid their inner world?
oh gosh, yes. Especially in high functioning women. I would say this is one of the hardest things it's not often, it's not the deep things, sexual trauma, abuse. The high functioning woman is like, it's got to be this way. And they're anxious. The anxiety is through the roof, right?
Yeah.
Overworking themselves, and overworking becomes a coping mechanism.
Mm.
And it's often very hard to say, shake, almost want to shake like you're doing this for nothing. Because all of that success you want, you'll still have it if it's coming to you one way or the other, but not by brutalizing yourself through the process. If that makes any sense. So, this ambition drives a lot of solitude,
Mm.
ambition. Listen, ambition is great. If you're ambitious, great. It's good.
Mhm.
Um, but it does drive a lot of anxiety, a lot of unnecessary competitivism, competition, excuse me. Uh, and it can eventually drive depression, right? Drive because you're you're living underneath those ambitions. If something doesn't come to fruition,
Yeah.
we start turning in on ourselves. That whole thing about not being good enough.
So, how do you guide your clients from busy to balanced?
Busy to balanced. I often try to help clients connect to either a younger version of themselves
Mm.
who they're taking under their tutelage,
Okay.
or like a very young, optimistic, hopeful, dear-eyed, hopeful version of themselves. Or if they are women who have girl children, I ask them to sort of the Gestalt method of to act as their children act. What would you tell your daughter?
Okay.
What would you want? Right. We wouldn't want, the truth is, we don't want our children getting all the way through high school into college and not having a sense of who they are, having a sense that they have the ability to be who they are, to waste some time, to explore, to not be under the pressure of performing. There is a lot of information on this research right now that if you can, in some way, do what feels right to you, even if it's a low earning job.
Mhm.
In the long run, you're likely to make more money. This is actually true,
Okay.
and or save more. So there's no real knowing, certainly people manage money well, but you could make $150,000 a year and still end up poorer than the guy that's flipping burgers if you are just running that to be ambitious.
Right. Right.
The balance is important. It's important to our health. It's important also to remember that there are no guarantees. So you can work yourself like a dog.
Right.
You can do that, right, to show others. But there is not really a guarantee that there will be a payoff or the payoff that you decide it might be there for you.
Right. Might be something totally different.
We have no control over tomorrow.
Exactly.
And you certainly wouldn't want to you would want probably your 18-year-old self to remember to take baths and spend some time with a book, um, to journey about what she saw in her own face today when she looked in a mirror.
Mm.
Yeah. Journal.
Yeah, darling.
Hmm.
So if depression had a voice in life of a Black woman over 50, what might it be trying to say? But not to destroy her, but to get her attention.
The depression might say, where are you?
Okay.
Where are you? Probably, if it's a Black woman over 50, depression might say, you might be looking in the mirror and depression might say, who are you anymore? I miss you. I don't recognize you. You've abandoned yourself too long. And that is what I'd written in my notes is that depression isn't always a sign of failure, right? Depression isn't always a sign that something is terribly wrong. It is a wake up call. It's a way of your body and your mind and your spirit saying, give me some attention.
Mm.
It's my turn now. It's my turn now.
So how do you help her listen with compassion and not judgment?
I often take so I speak a lot about super egos.
Mm.
And this is Jungian work, and it's real work. It's important work. Many of us have what I call the inner critic, the inner critic voice. So that's a super ego that's always right, always putting you in your place.
Yeah.
You're ugly. You're fat. No one likes you. No one was ever going to like you. They're going to sabotage you. All men are the same. All women are the same.
Right, right. All the things. Yeah.
Hmm. And that inner critic can also be saying, which is the same thing backwards, they're going to hurt you. They're terrible. They're stupid. They're right. Um, so, what I try to do with my clients is if they've been criticized coming up in their lives, particularly because the inner critic usually doesn't show up out of nowhere,
Hmm.
that inner critic has been hurt, you've been hurt, and the inner critic is trying to keep you on your toes so that you're not hurt again.
Yeah.
The problem is that you're now an adult woman over the age of 50. And this little inner critic superego is only about 9 years old. And so they're still punching from this place of emotional immaturity and fear. We now, as the woman, have to go back and meet that critical inner ego. And what I like to do, if you have been criticized, if you had been abused or neglected or had a critical parent, a mother, a father, connect that inner critic to that person.
Hmm.
Right?
Okay.
Right. So if my inner critic was my mother, you're ugly, you're this, you're that, I want to now realize, oh, no, we've got to break that pattern of language.
Hmm.
That's so, getting to where did that voice come from? Where did that come from? And do we want to continue to carry that? Oftentimes, when people can make the connection that this inner critic
Yeah.
is not, is no longer useful, then they can integrate it.
Hmm. Okay.
That probably sounds like a lot of psychobabble.
No. And even if it does, then that's okay. People can rewatch this and take notes.
That's correct. That is correct. They can do that. So.
So what should we do when we're looking for a therapist to make sure that we're getting the cultural competent and age related care? Because I know when I had my first therapist before I found you, she was great, but she was a bit younger, so I didn't feel that she would understand what I was going through now in my late 50s.
Mhm.
And then when I found you, I was like, perfect. She'll understand not just on a superficial level, but an actual, possibly going through the same things. So what would you tell, especially Black women? Because I mean, that was my biggest thing too. She had to be a Black therapist.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, Having this is very, very important, and I'd like to start it by um, I'd like to start addressing this question by encouraging everyone that knows a young Black person, male or female, that is heading off to college, encourage them um, to explore this field. Right now in America, there are only 4% Black therapists. Okay, that's 4%. And the therapists of color, that it only moves up to about 3, so there's 6%, in other words, right? And representation. And we know this, we don't argue it clinically anymore. We know that it is important to find a therapist that you believe is can be culturally competent, right? Culturally competent, and it is absolutely recommended that you look for Black women, look for therapists that honor their full identity, right? Your race, your age, your faith, um, your age, your race, your faith, your politics, even, right? Particularly for Black people in Christian groups. Politics are important. Politics are simply important, period. Politics, there was one other thing, and your history. And what you said was, hey, and what Black people say is, and in order for me to feel safe in this space, in order for me to disclose these very private things, in order for me to be vulnerable and to speak up when I've come from a society and I come up in a life that has discouraged my speaking up, I have to feel safe.
Right.
I have to believe that you understand me. And here's the second part of this is and by the way, speaking of therapy, I have a client shortly.
Okay.
We're going overtime. I'm just hoping that she doesn't call in and mess up the phone. So
Oh,
it's okay to be late. It's okay, because this is a kind of a, we're going to jump on, but this is so important. So now one of the big differences too in how Black Americans, because we completely accept and embrace that we have our own cultural way of speaking, expressing, being, right. I mean, look at me using my hands and my body right now. This is what we do, right? We're rhythmic people. But where I come from, we don't trust you if we don't know something about you. Where I come from, we want to know that you understand because you've had similar experiences. And as a therapist, when I work with Black women, I share more, I disclose more, not to sit there and tell you about who I am, but to cultivate that sense of understanding and that I get it. And the other thing is I get angry a lot with my patients. I get downright angry with them. Like I'm their biggest like soapbox angry therapist. And I get really, really sad with them too, for them. Because I think that from a cultural place, because we are so rhythmic, so visceral, many of us want that. We want to know that a sister's got us.
right.
Yeah, that she can hold that.
Mhm.
And that really is, yeah. But saying that, I am so privileged. Like, I work with so many women of color from India, from Asia, other parts of Asia, Muslim women, Christian women, Hindu women,
Yeah.
and of course a Black woman. And I feel really honored to work with them. And I am starting to write a lot of cultural practice around the work we're doing. Yeah.
Well, I do have one more question for
All
you.
right.
If there's one message you want Black women over 50 struggling with depression to hear loud and clear, what would it be?
Hmm. Hear me, women, when I say this. And if you want to challenge me, just write me and call me up and say, Temple, and just give me 10 minutes of your pro bono service. You are not broken. You are not broken. Period. I don't care what you went through before this. I don't care if you were a teenage mother who had to abandon her children, if you were an addict, a prostitute, you were in prison. You don't have to be broken anymore, right? We have a right to be whole again. So you're not too late and you're not alone. And if the first person doesn't answer the call the way you need them to, just keep going down the list. Don't give up, right? Don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. It's going to be very easy to give up on others if you've already given up on yourself. Women, hear me. You are allowed to rest. You're allowed to rest. No one has to give you permission to do that. You are allowed to begin again. And you are allowed to let the pain go. No one says, and this is why I get really up in arms around over preaching trauma and over preaching Black trauma in a negative way, in a way that won't hurt us.
Mhm.
Excuse me, that won't help us.
Okay.
We don't have to carry this for the rest of our lives. I'm not going to let the rapist, the abuser, they had all the past. Why would I give them a hand in my destiny?
Mhm.
I don't have to live that way anymore. And that is, from that leads to taking your joy back, right? Or creating it for the first time. So, yeah, the message is stop, drop, and rest. Stop, drop, and pray. Stop, drop, and call. Stop, drop, and reinvent.
Mhm. Okay. Well,
Stop, drop, and tie your shoes and get ready to run into your next journey, right? Your next phase, the next stage of who you are.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, such a pleasure.
Yes, I look forward to these monthly uh
I think it's so delightful
ah,
that you are including me in this way, and I'm very grateful. I love your show
thank you.
and your episodes, and I love mental health, and I love love, and so I love God. I love humor. Maybe we'll do an episode on the importance of humor and laughter one day.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I'll
but
note. Well, I'll
thank
note
you.
that. No, I'll
Yeah,
note that down
just
because we
yes,
need it. It's so important. So I think it's
absolutely.
something we should pass by because that's very important. Humor and laughter, definitely. So
Absolutely. I want to thank you. And again, we talked about if folks have questions, we'd love to say their name and answer those questions. They can be random, about any
exactly.
mental health disorder. I can't say that I'll have the answer to everything,
Right.
but I love going off the cuff like that. So,
Okay. Well, yes, please leave a comment, ask a question for Temple. And again, this will be a monthly thing that we are putting together. So Temple, thank you again for
you're
showing up and being a
welcome.
wonderful guest and a wonderful therapist.
Thank you.
Everyone, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I will have Temple's information in the description. So if you want to get in contact with her, just don't take my therapy spot. So
Your spot is solid. I do need to talk with you about rescheduling. There's a
no worries.
time, but your spot. I feel honored to work with you, and you're a wonderful person, and I love what you're doing. I really love what you're doing, and as I said, I try not to creep on you in between, so I keep my head clear for our sessions. But yeah, thank you. This is great, and I'm very curious to see what women think about these episodes and about the things we discuss.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. All right, you guys. Thank you again, and we will see you soon.
take care, everybody.